Welcome to today's Explainer. You know that terrifying phantom pocket pat? That mini heart attack when you think you've lost your phone? Yeah, we've all been there. Today, we're diving into the hard science behind why we often feel so mentally drained, scattered, and just flat-out fatigued in our modern, hyper-connected world. Even if you think you're an absolute master of focus, the research we're about to unpack is going to totally change the way you look at that little glass rectangle you carry with you everywhere. Let's get into it.
Picture this highly relatable scenario. You sit down at your desk to get some deep, focused work done. You diligently put your phone perfectly on silent, leave it sitting right next to your keyboard, and yet, you still feel this strange mental fog. You're exhausted. Why? Well, we tend to view our smartphones as just these neutral tools, right? Just sitting there waiting for us to use them. But as you'll see, science is revealing that your smartphone is actually an invisible drain on your energy. It's actively taxing your brain, even when the screen is completely black. Crazy, right?
To understand why this happens, we kind of have to grasp the sheer volume of our digital connection. Take a look at this number, 85. The data shows the average smartphone owner interacts with their phone 85 times a day, from the second we wake up to sitting in traffic right up until the middle of the night. This isn't just a tool we pick up occasionally anymore, it's a device fundamentally wired into the minutiae of our daily lives, creating an unprecedented state of constant, non-stop connection.
And this constant connection? It's given birth to a psychological phenomenon called continuous partial attention. Tech executive Linda Stone actually coined this term back in 1998, giving a scientific name to that visceral, everyday feeling of being pulled in a dozen different directions. It's this chronic underlying habit we have of constantly scanning our environment, optimizing opportunities, and trying to make sure we don't miss a single thing. We do this because, deep down, we have this burning desire to remain a live node on the network.
Now, you might be thinking, wait, isn't that just multitasking? Well, not quite. Multitasking is driven by a conscious, deliberate desire to be productive. Like, say, folding laundry while listening to an audiobook. You're intentionally doing two things at once. Continuous partial attention, on the flip side, is totally automatic. It's a subconscious process motivated by a chronic fear of missing out. Good old FOMO. So it's really less about being productive and way more about this ever-present anxiety of being disconnected.
Okay, let's dive right into Section 1, the brain drain hypothesis, and what connection actually costs us.
So where does this psychological mindset meet hard, clinical consequences? What actually happens to the human brain when it's trapped in this state? Well, researchers at the University of Texas at Austin set out to test exactly this, proposing what they call the brain drain hypothesis. To get it, we need to understand two finite resources our brains completely rely on. First up is working memory capacity. Think of this as your brain's mental scratch pad. It's what lets you hold a phone number in your head while you dial it. The second is fluid intelligence. This is your raw problem-solving power, your ability to reason and solve brand new problems on the fly. And here's the absolutely crucial catch. Both of these rely on the exact same finite pool of attentional resources. When that limited pool of resources is drained by continuous partial attention, the consequences are honestly pretty severe. This fragmented focus directly impairs your working memory capacity. It literally lowers your learning and listening comprehension, meaning you're actually absorbing less of what people are saying right to your face. And because your cognitive resources are depleted, you suffer from poor assessment and default to safer, risk-averse decision-making. Ultimately, this constant pressure to stay perpetually available spikes your cortisol and stress levels, blurring the lines between your personal and professional life and setting you up for way more frequent and intense burnout. So protecting your focus isn't just about productivity. It is literally a matter of preserving your mental and physical health.
Which brings us to Section 2, the Ward experiment, testing smartphone salience.
This is where things get really fascinating. Researcher Adrian Ward and his team wanted to measure the actual cognitive cost of our phones when they are not actively interrupting us, like what happens when it's just sitting there in the room. Here's how they set up the experiment. They brought hundreds of participants into a lab to take intense tests measuring that mental scratch pad and fluid intelligence we just talked about. They divided them into three groups. Group 1 placed their phones right on the desk, high salience but completely silenced and face down. Group 2 kept their phones in their pocket or bag, medium salience, out of sight. And Group 3 left their phones in another room entirely, low salience. I want you to guess right now which group performed the best. And did a silenced face-down phone actually make a difference?
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the stark contrast in the data. The people who left their phones in the other room significantly outperformed the people whose phones were sitting on the desk. This is the massive aha twist of the whole study. Even though the phone was totally silenced and placed face down, its mere physical presence actively drained the participants' brain power. Their working memory capacity and fluid intelligence measurably dropped just by having the device anywhere in their field of vision.
This quote from the researchers perfectly hits the nail on the head regarding this counterintuitive reality. They state that the mere presence of these devices reduces available cognitive capacity even when people are successful at maintaining sustained attention. Why? Well, because actively resisting the urge to check your phone isn't a passive state. It takes actual effort. Your brain has to recruit its limited capacity attentional resources to inhibit that automatic desire to grab the phone. So by using your brain power just to ignore the phone, you literally have less brain power available to solve the problem right in front of you. You basically become temporarily less intelligent.
Now you might be thinking, come on, I don't think about my phone when I'm deep in work. Well, guess what? The participants felt the exact same way. When asked how often they thought about their cell phones during the experiment, the most common answer across the board was not at all. Furthermore, the vast majority believed the physical location of their phone had absolutely zero effect on their performance. This proves that this cognitive drain is happening completely subconsciously. It is a true illusion of focus. Your brain is expending precious energy to monitor and ignore the device without you even realizing it's happening.
Let's move to Section 3 and see how this builds. The hidden cost of dependence.
We really have to look at our own psychological relationship with our devices here, because this brain drain effect, it heavily depends on just how personally reliant you are on your technology. To frame this, let's look at the depth of our reliance. Check out these jarring statistics. 91% of people report they literally never leave home without their phones. And even more incredibly, 46% say they couldn't live without them. For nearly half the population, this little piece of plastic and glass feels as essential as oxygen. It's deeply, deeply integrated into our sense of self and our daily survival.
And this brilliantly illustrates the dark side of that reliance. For people with low smartphone dependence, the location of the phone didn't matter all that much. But look at the highly dependent users. For them, having the phone on the desk caused a massive, massive drop in cognitive performance compared to having it in the other room. It's a cruel irony, right? The more you depend on your phone, the worse your cognitive penalty is when it's simply sitting nearby.
Which brings us to Section 4, reclaiming your cognitive capacity.
Now I know all this data can feel a bit sobering, maybe even a little depressing, but the goal of this explainer absolutely isn't to make you feel defeated. We want to give you the blueprint to take your mind back. The direct science-backed antidote to all of this is a concept known as deep work. Simply put, it's the practice of dedicating sustained attention to a cognitively demanding task in a completely distraction-free environment. It's about intentionally designing your surroundings so that your brain doesn't have to waste a drop of subconscious energy fighting off the urge to check for notifications.
So how do we actually achieve this? The literature highlights several concrete behavioral changes that you can start implementing today. First up is time blocking. This means dedicating specific, uninterrupted chunks of time to specific tasks rather than bouncing around between them. Next is the Pomodoro technique. This is where you use short, scheduled work sprints followed by breaks to keep your concentration really high. Then there's digital detoxing, which is incredibly effective. Just disconnecting periodically drastically lowers your cognitive load. And finally, kind of ironically, using technology to fight technology. Using targeted mindfulness and meditation apps to actively train your brain's sustained attention and cognitive control.
So the crucial point here is this. When you really need your brain to perform at its absolute peak, willpower just isn't enough. The data clearly shows that simply turning the phone face down or even powering it off entirely does not solve the problem if the device is still in your environment. True cognitive relief requires defined separation. You have to put actual physical distance between yourself and the device. Put it in another room, toss it in a drawer down the hall. You have to remove the visual cue entirely.
I want to leave you with this final provocative thought. Your smartphone is a modern marvel. It connects you to the entire globe in an absolute instant. But is it disconnecting you from your own mind? Is it silently stealing the very brain power you need to create, to think, and to thrive? The next time you sit down to do something truly important, I challenge you. Take that phone, walk it into the other room, and see just how brilliant you really are. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and I'll catch you next time.